It's really great that you created time and space to do this episode today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Sanna. Really, really happy to be here.
Yeah. And what I think would be lovely to start with, especially because I think it's really relatable today, is that we are all kind of in a very crazy time. And I think here in the Netherlands, but I also think that in England as well, and different parts of the world, we're in lockdown again or still. And I know you dive really deep into mental health or mental and emotional health. So, how do you feel it has affected, first of all, you and your experience, and also what if you've seen with a lot of other people you know, or kind of tuning in a little bit more into the collective?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always talk about how revolutionary it's been, the pandemic experience for all of us. I feel like this has been a very confrontational process in terms of doing the work, self-work, and what does that look like? It could look like many ways, like different things. It means different things to different people, but self-work is just literally means, in my understanding, is self-awareness. I think we've been pushed to do this work collectively, and seems like we don't have a choice anymore to distract, because if we look at this from a very bird's eye view, without getting too attached to the emotional side of what's happening through pandemic, if we can just kind of detach from that and look at it from an objective way, I think, look at the the shops being closed, the restaurants being closed, shopping centers, a lot of the activities like gyms and other places, cafes, and if you look at it, these are the places where we tend to usually in the past go to distract ourselves, mainly to so that we can socialize, or maybe we have a coffee addiction, or maybe we just love having a coffee in a coffee shop. Again, restaurant or socializing, going to bars and restaurants. I think these can, yes, they are very enjoyable, but at the same time, I think for the Western world, it is the simplest way to distract and avoid to be alone and to be with ourselves. I think when this is taken away, I think a lot of the people who weren't thinking about self-work suddenly became open. It's so confrontational that I've seen, my observation is that a lot of people who wouldn't even care a year ago suddenly now opening up to asking these big questions. And then there's people like you, Sanne. We met a few years back, and we've been deep diving into the self-development journey and self-work. So when pandemic hit, I didn't really experience a big change. That's what I noticed. I know that a lot of coaches and therapists and people like that you probably know and connected with, they probably say the same. I realized that I've already cut down on TV. I sold my TV 5 years ago, and I've never watched the TV since, because I wanted to be in control of what I'm consuming instead of just keep downloading subconsciously all these things that are thrown at us. So that was okay for me. And in terms of like minimalist living type of thing, I was already practicing a lot of that. Obviously, it's part of my job. If I can't embody it, then I cannot recommend it, type of thing. So all of the things that the pandemic is confronting many of us, I feel like you and I, some of us been already in that space for a very long time, say like in the last 5 years. So when pandemic came with a massive, when it dropped on us, it wasn't a big overwhelm or fear or anything like that. What I experienced was an epiphany of, I didn't realize I was actually living like this all along. So that kind of helped me to stay more grounded, because it wasn't a shock to my system, and I kind of knew how to navigate those wild waters, because I've done the work previous years, when it wasn't forced upon us, let's say. As you know, there are situations in life that something happens and then we're forced to be confronted and do the work. So I had my share back in 2012, actually, quite many years ago. And since then, you know, slowly, with choice, you know, with my own decision and choice, I kept, you know, stepping into those wild waters of my psyche, which was a good process now looking back. But now what I'm noticing is like, we don't have choice but to do it. It's come quite as a force now and collectively. That's what I'm observing. So I am aware of this, of course, you know, there's a spike in anxiety, depression levels in mental health. And the reason I'm passionate about mental health, because I'm a recovering OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So I know what it feels like to be trapped or stuck in a disorder that is not natural and is quite dysfunctional. Not only hurts you, but hurts everyone else around you. So that's where my passion comes in for the mental health. And of course, the holistic psychotherapy speaks to me because I know, and you know, that sometimes the trauma or the mental health disorders, we cannot talk ourselves out of it through just having a conversation or reading a book. These are processes that we need to go through. It's more like a somatic experiencing. We feel in our bodies. You know, there's a lot needs to happen before we can release and overcome, at least manage or become aware of these dysfunctional patterns and behaviors. So that's where my passion comes in, because I've been there. I know how detrimental it can be for anyone who experiences any of these mental health disorders. And there's a wide spectrum, as you know. OCD is just one of them. There's, you know, bipolar, complex PTSD. We have, you know, borderline. We have so many like narcissistic tendencies. So there are, you know, on the spectrum of that. I mean, it's quite complex and it's very hard to know which is which. But ultimately, if we were to just kind of put it all in one place, the mental health can be quite detrimental. And it does get out of hand, and people are really overwhelmed currently, right now, and they're going to need more support, at least urgent support right now. So that's where, you know, my passion comes, to at least do something that I can give back and at least be the container or be the facilitator or be the person that can witness their journey, because you know how that works. When we have that accountability, it's much easier. So yeah, this is what I've been doing. I've been observing. I just keep doing my own self-work while I am noticing and also reaching out and also building a meditation group, as you know, where we try and get together with everyone. It's like a really therapeutic way to actually handle this situation.
Yeah, and I've been really noticing, kind of following what you're doing, and I think it's very beautiful that you started doing it in such a time where it's a lot more needed. Because I think you mentioned this as well, is that in a way we had our wake up call, so to speak, to become aware of all these things a lot of years ago. You know, and now it's kind of that we are having this wake up call collectively. And I feel like the people who've already started this process a longer time ago, we had the time and the space to kind of build that mental and emotional resiliency, and to already, like you mentioned, to change a lot of the coping mechanisms that we have. You know, so because that's kind of, we've become aware of our escapism, and there's always more to see and to witness. That's why the inner work continues. But it makes us a lot less dependent than on some of these coping mechanisms, which might be like shopping or whatever it may be. And it's not so to say that necessarily getting together or doing a lot of these things is a coping mechanism. It's not necessarily the same as like drinking coffee with a friend. It can be fun and a great way to connect. It's just that more in a way that when we really needed in a sense in the moment when we don't have those social occasions and we severely suffer. It's usually a sign that there's something more there for us to explore. And I feel like, especially in a way when we're completely new to it, we need to be guided by it, or at least someone who holds a space. So that's why it's really great to see that you, and I've seen a lot of other people, kind of step up more, also in a way that those of us who do have a little bit more experience and expertise to share it, because it is a time that is really confronting. And it can even be confronting if you've been doing inner work or therapy for a very long time, because, of course, all of us were affected by it in a different way. So I think it's so essential to go through it together. And
Mm-hmm.
what I also would love to know is, what are, you already mentioned meditation, but there might be more there. Some of the tools or the things that actually helped you to do the deeper inner work, and what you've noticed that helped you kind of to heal those wounds and to kind of stop running away from yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So in my training, also foundation of my training comes from somatic experiencing, as you probably know what that is. It's about bodily processes of emotional suppressed traumas, or any kind of emotions that it's been trapped in our nervous system. So a lot of my foundational work comes from working with people who are severely traumatized as a child, or who's had very difficult, upbringing, emotional neglect, and things like that. So there are a lot of modalities that we can learn, or if at least if people are, because when we say confronting this pandemic, what I'm observing also is that it's actually amplifying those emotions that are trapped in our nervous system. So you probably observed this already. A lot of people who's not interested in talking about trauma or emotional things, they're already opening up. Like people that you probably know around you that is never interested in self-development or anything like that, they are suddenly becoming open. So this is what I mean by the reason behind that is that the process of this pandemic is actually amplifying what's inside. And the fact that we can no longer use those coping mechanisms that you mentioned. There is, of course, having a coffee with your friend on a very authentic connection is beautiful. But somehow in the West, when we're not mindful, or at least when we're not self-aware, it becomes a dysfunctional pattern. It's like I need to be always out, need to be always, in a social scene, need to be that feeling of needing to be always doing something. So that's the difference. So of course, when those coping mechanisms are removed from our lives, then what do? We sit with it a lot. And some people are not in a very peaceful environment. They live, now that we're all locked in our own homes, not everybody lives, they don't live alone, they don't live in a peaceful environment. A lot of people have big families that they never spent this much time together before. So all of those unspoken, buried or swept under the carpet things are coming up, because the moment you start spending more time with those people, your family members, the your intimate relationships and everything is just amplified on a next level. I don't know if this is your experience, but probably about 90% of the females, even the males, I think I know, they are going through separation. They're literally going through divorce. And I remember before I left London Real, as you know, as a coach, the last London Real tribe call that I did lead, I remember we had a lawyer on the call, this lady, she was our member, and she was a lawyer. And she said, since the pandemic, my phone hasn't stopped. Literally, like, so many people are filing divorce daily. So for me, this was shocking to, it was like a reality, just kind of a wake up call. Like, what is this thing? Why is it just now that so many people are filing a divorce? Of course, there are so many reasons. One is because they've never had to spend that much time with their spouse or partner, because both probably were busy or distracting themselves, not talking about the issues, rather sweep them under the carpet and then go on in that functional, way of life. And suddenly now they have to face it. Again, this happens with many people, with your children. Like, there are, it could be a children-parent relationship. It could be parents and children, like older parents. So there's so much going on, and seems like this pandemic has really hit the relationship area the most. It's almost like not just the relationship with the others, but the mostly relationship with ourselves. So this could be a really good way to look at it from an objective, like a bird's eye view, just to take away that emotional, painful side to the story and just look at it and think of it as, wow, I'm having to experience a lot of dysfunctional things are happening in my relationships, like everywhere around me, parents, children, spouses, partners. What if this is the reason because I don't have a healthy relationship with myself? So all of those dysfunctional relationships that, is literally a pure, direct form of confrontation of how the relationship is with ourselves. So there is a lot to be done here. I think we need to be more open-minded, and I think it's going to force us to take extreme ownership. I think it's going to take us to take our relationship with ourselves to the next level. So coming back to your question, so there are modalities that could be used specifically for healing wounds, healing trauma, or doing self-work in some way. But generally, meditation is the foundation. I'm not sure you heard me say this before. I always come back to meditation. It's like meditation for me is the foundation of all, and everything else just comes after that. That being said, I love yoga, Pilates, any type of natural movement, something like Ido Portal, he practices primal movement like lizard walk, duck walks, and, all kinds of like unscripted, natural flow movements. So we can do all of that to really move the body, because we said about somatic experiencing, this is really important, that we need to be really kind of drop into our body now. So this is a time to really drop into the body, because we've been living in our heads for too long, and this pandemic process is direct confronting that currently. And we need to drop into our body, and with whatever it takes. It's easy for me to say yoga, meditation, plant medicine, something else, but ultimately it could be anything that moves you, anything that makes you feel in the flow, painting, dancing, singing, sound, whatever it is, or playing an instrument, whatever it takes. So that's where we are at now currently.
Yeah, and what I really loved is that you also made the connection to relationships, because I feel like that is one of the greatest challenges right now. It's either your relationship with yourself, and how often it is, that shows, if there's like dysfunctionality there, it will show up in any other relationships. And I feel like I've noticed also a lot of people splitting up that I know, or that they're kind of in a situation that is extremely difficult. And I feel like the resiliency of our relationship is like being put on like to the max, and what it does, it can bring out the worst in us, right? Because that's kind of what pressure does. It's like put enough pressure on something, and at some point it's either going to break, or it's going to completely lift that pressure off, so to speak. And what I've noticed is that what I actually learned through the deeper inner work, and also meditation, and which is therapy and going really deep within yourself in whatever way, whatever method, is that through that I've learned to really know what it is that I want and need. And it also helped me to be directly in touch with my emotions, instead of just being overwhelmed by them and they just pop up and they take over, which I think I had more before and still sometimes have. We're all human. But I've noticed that it helped me to communicate a lot better. And that a lot of times in relationship, it's also the being able to communicate in a healthy way, or even when conflict happens, it doesn't have to be anything bad, but having the ability to actually resolve conflict together. And I feel that that strengthens our relationship. And for me, that process really started with inner work, also learning to solve conflict within myself, becoming aware of all these different aspects within me. And we can have this in meditation, right? We become aware of all these different parts and pulling in one direction and the other one part wants this. And I feel like it brings up all the parts that we have suppressed in our unconscious, and not only on an individual level, but also collectively. And the situation itself can be extremely stressful. So it actually, recently I've been so much brought back to movement. That's why I love that you mentioned that, because as human beings, what we really forget is that one of the easiest way to release stress, especially stress that's stored in the body, is through movement. And that in a way, yes, it can be really helpful to really become aware of certain dynamics and to really have that mental understanding to change the pattern. But sometimes all we really need is to really allow ourselves to move. And I recently had a client of mine who I spoke with, and we became aware of how movement in the West has become very unhealthy. That we're constantly pushing and forcing ourselves to move a certain way, and it's just about this physique, and it gives us such a limited perspective on movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that concept that you just brought to our attention. Today I had a walk, as I mentioned before we jumped on, with one of my great connections, and we did like 9 kilometers of walk and talk. And what come up the most was this. We both come from a very similar background. So if you look back, beginning of our journey into self-development, which is normal way, actually. It's like an entry point where you start finding out all of these great tools that you can implement into your life. And then everything becomes very regimental. So in the West, somehow we've been wired into making things a very regimental process. I mean, anything that can take us away from connecting to our intuition, our essence, like it just, we're there. Like in the West, going back to my own experience, 5 years ago, I remember having a checklist and the connection, my friend that I walked today, she was talking about a massive list of checklists every day. So was I, beginning of my journey in especially online coaching. I thought having that regimental approach was going to keep me going like a machine, and literally overrides everything that we are learning spiritually and evolving as a spiritual beings, because we are. But somehow this is not so much promoted in the West in our modern day. Like you said, it's more about the image, the look, and we have to kill our bodies in gyms, pushing weights, lifting the weights to have that image. But this doesn't mean we are connected to our intuition, our heart, our essence. So I think this regimental obsession needs to just be ditched. And this is exactly what we're talking about today with my friend. And we said, now we are entering into a time we need to allow. We need to allow and do practices that feel good in our gut, in our body, like things that makes us feel good. If it's cooking, cook a hearty meal if that's your thing. That's going to help you connect. That's a meditation itself. If it's just rolling around on the floor like a 2-year-old, do that. If it's painting, just do that. If it's listening to music all day long, do that. Whatever it takes, you've got to just go with that. Forget your regimental checklist or your morning routine, or some of these crazy entrepreneurs use, like 5 a.m. journaling, meditation, intermittent fasting. All of these are beautiful practices, but it needs to feel right for the person. We cannot keep chasing these because it's the trend or it's the thing that we're learning, which is very easy in this digital age. Now we've been fed with these ideas that if you want to be successful, you got to wake up at 5 a.m. If you want to be successful, you got to fast, meditate, run, do, whatever, all these things. But what the pandemic is teaching us, ditch all of that and learn and practice allowing. How about that? What does it feel like to do? Because we almost feel guilty if we don't. This is the programming of that regimental approach to everything. I've been there. I know what it feels like. If I didn't complete one checkbox, I would feel guilty all day. If I missed one thing out of my list, I would feel so uncomfortable. So yes, it's a big demand and a transition right now, but this is the way forward. This is how we're going to overcome this pandemic, post-pandemic situation. This is how we're going to build that resilience that you talk about, whether it's within ourselves, within our environment. And the most beautiful thing is that you keep bringing up, it's about building resilience with ourselves first. And my favorite thing is the boundaries, because when I have a theory that the most, divorces and, breakups are happening right now is because now that we've been forced to stay together in a closed homes, suddenly, a lot of people realize that they haven't been able to put boundaries in place. So so instead of communicating it, like you said, in a healthy way, and start little by little implementing small boundaries in place, we rather just, I'm out, I'm done here. Like, we don't investigate enough. Like, why is this marriage worked or was working before the pandemic and now is not? Is it a long time of buildup of stuff that hasn't been dealt with? Yes. Is it a boundary issue? Probably. So there are a lot of nuances than just cutting someone out. It's because maybe we haven't had the opportunity to do the self-work, and maybe we have, a lot of trouble or weaknesses in a way to set boundaries with people. So, and when it comes to crunch, we rather be out than face what that is. So yeah, there's a lot can be learned here, especially with the relationship space, but ultimately it all comes down to the relationship with ourselves. So
yeah, and I feel like our quality of life and our mental and emotional health is relationships.
yeah.
That's it. If you would really simplify it, it's really the health of our relationships. And a lot of times the core of it is like, it is often in childhood, or just sometimes can even be passed on by so many generations, right? We live, and I feel like in a way, we live in a very difficult, challenging time right now. But we also live in a time where we have so much more awareness and so much more wisdom and tools available to us that our parents or all the generations before, they didn't have that. So we are now able, even though we're now kind of, a lot of people are forced and challenged into it, which is of course never a good position to be in. But at the same time, it's also a really great opportunity to actually use all the tools we have wisely. It's like you said before, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like with the media, we're constantly consuming. And for me, really things shifted when I really became aware of, first of all, how much I'm consuming, because it doesn't matter what stuff, if it's too much, even very good conscious or aware things, if it's too much, it overwhelms our system. And also really becoming aware of the sources and how it makes us feel. And it's not necessarily just about what is right and what is wrong, and there's a lot of debate and things happening right now, but for me, I think it's always important to really tune into, like, how is it making me feel, and becoming aware of the impact that something has on you, and that now our attention, and that's what I've learned through meditation, is what do you give your attention to.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the most important thing we need to focus upon, and like what is really important for you. And now when everything is, in a way, not everything, but a lot of things are taking away, then it can also help us prioritize what is really important. And with that open space that has been created, what do I really want to invest my time in? And it might just be to get to know yourself. That that can be enough.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's a long overdue that we all need to start to get to know ourselves and build that relationship. It's way overdue, honestly. Learn about how to be, like, the saddest thing that really upsets me is when people carry around these negative perceptions around how they will be perceived if they didn't, if they said no, if they wanted a little time out, if they wanted a little privacy here and there, if they wanted to do something to just, for themselves. Somehow, like, when did we learn this? Like, when did we learn that this was a bad thing and will make us look like a bad person or selfish person, just to have a morning off or a day off by ourselves, like getting to know ourselves, doing something we love and enjoy. Like, why is it so difficult to communicate this to those people around us? This is, I think, once we can grasp this, I think a lot of the things will be simplified more and more. And often we always suffer in imagination. They say you suffer in your mind, and what is actually true, it's true. We all carry these programming from whatever experiences we had in the past, that we assume, and we have expectations, and we have these weird dysfunctional way of thinking about how people perceiving us, and that that fear of rejection and fear of being judged and things like that play massive role on how we are with ourselves and with everyone else. I think I'm hopeful this process is going to, like you said, we have a lot of tools, a lot of people talking about it now. I mean, we're in a digital age. When else did we experience such a thing? Everything is under a click away, under our fingertips. So I think we're in a good position, and I think if we all come together with those people who think the same and create these connections and big movements, I think we're going to get a handle on this situation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really love that you also mentioned about the guilt, because I feel that it came up again, because I think, like, in a lot of way, through guilt, that's kind of how we punish ourselves, right? And that it's good to be aware that there are, like, so many things, and even if it's not the intention behind it, but a lot of things, a lot of, like, the coping mechanisms are a lot of times based upon and kind of kept in place through our guilt. And it can either be in relationships, like we're not taking the time out for ourselves. And I know when I'm not taking enough time out for myself, I also become less of a lovely person, So it's important to know what you need. And also mentioned before, it's something that's really deeply, I think, ingrained in Western culture. And the same is with the movement and with food and with nutrition and so many different things. It's like that we've learned that in order for us to be successful, we kind of have to be really hard on ourselves, and we kind of have to punish ourselves, and kind of, if we don't do anything perfectly, kind of we or have make a mistake, we have to feel guilty for it. And I feel that actually now is a really good time to really become aware of that and change it. And I also became really aware of how I did that actually through movement, and also what you said. I wasn't like super strict on having to do everything on a to-do list, but always kind of expecting myself to do more and be more. And so it's like always a more. And I feel like we've now really seeing how dysfunctional that more pattern really is.
Yeah.
Because it's just filling that void.
Yeah.
And what I love about meditation and of these other things is actually learning to become present with that. And also, what I love what you said is that the importance of connection, because in the beginning we said, of course, about how, in a way, just always sticking out, going like for drinks or whatever. It can be in a way a coping mechanism. But what I know you and I definitely don't want to say is that like connection is an escapism, but it's really becoming aware of that. What we need is actually healthy connection. And we actually need to be received in a space or in a group, are we able to express these things that we're struggling with or that we find difficult, instead of the more that is kind of more the coping mechanism to make different, to kind of really more the pretense, having to pretend that you're fine in the moment you're with other people and you forget things so you feel better, but eventually you'll just get back to the same thing, and it's kind of like this loop.
It is. I like the definition of healthy connection. I think this is what's driving this change, this current movement and transformation. This is a transformation journey, of course, the post-pandemic. I think healthy connections are driving this thing. And finding the others, getting together, finding a space where you can express yourself authentically. So you're not too worried about, how you will be received or rejected or judged. I think this is the big one. One of my biggest, my favorite thing is just to have, like, I know the power of having someone to witness your journey. I've experienced this firsthand. When you find those people that are very similar on similar path, at least similar thinking mindset, I think it really helps. I know it sounds really childish, like, why do you need a validation? This is not a validation. This is a total space where you can be, you can practice authenticity and then received, and you don't need to pretend to be someone else. Like, you can actually drop your mask and breathe. I think this is what we need. And so that's why I know there are a lot of groups, a lot of meditation groups, a lot of other communities are kind of being birthed currently. And it's a good thing. It's a positive thing, because we need to come together. It's almost like, if someone is really immersed themselves in that high drive life, social, always with someone, and they find it very difficult to be alone. And the moment they're alone, they don't know what to do with themselves. So I think that's a good entry point, to start with a community of like-minded people where they can start expressing themselves more and find those little entry points. I call them entry points because, the evolution, like the self-work is infinite, and we all need an entry point. Like, I think sometimes when we feel so stuck and nothing is moving, nothing is changing, nothing is happening, I think those are good moments to really find the little entry point. What can that be? Find the others, go into those groups, push yourself out of your comfort zone to just take one step forward and see what's happened, what happens after that. I think that would be amazing going forward if we can just kind of be more open-minded. And, you know, what do you have to lose? Not much. You know, we're all stuck in our homes now. And the only thing we have currently is to do some work on ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like now is really the time, and I think it because it's like a two-way street. It's like in a way what we sometimes need in order to heal is to really be in that space internally. But what is also really important to know how beautiful and beneficial it can be to be witness in that process,
Mm.
and that without it, it wouldn't be as healing. And that a lot of times our hurt is in relationships, and it's kind of in connection. So it's also a place where our healing is.
Mm.
And in a way, it's like, in a way, of course, we all suffer a little bit, at least, or for some of us, greatly, not being able to connect as we usually are. And I feel like that actually signals something very important to us is that we are relationally dependent. And that is something that's actually very healthy, but it has grown into something so unhealthy, right? When we look at our relationships dynamics. And I feel like now is a time when everything is so amplified,
Yeah.
is that we can really shift that. And I feel like, of course, you can do that alone, but I don't feel like we're meant to go through such a deep process completely alone.
Mm-hmm.
Because a part of the healing is also the sharing, or just recognizing yourself and other people, knowing you're not alone in what you're going through. And yeah, that there are more people like you who might think differently or have interests. And I feel like that is the beauty actually of the internet and of the web that we now have created, is in a way, is it's nothing I think beats being in person. But it's also beautiful that to see that all these different people, where you think like, oh, I was the only one who was really interested in spirituality or psychedelics or inner work. But now I see that there's so many other people like me who also want to learn more about this and are also willing to share and build connection together.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Agree. That's so beautiful. Mm-hmm.
And what would you love to see, like the way now when we look at this moment, like moving forward, how we go through this pandemic and come out of it? Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. This is um, you know, I always say this is a collective dark night of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to have maybe a bit more of it. Maybe we're going deeper in the darkness a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I think we just kind of, in a way, I feel like we've done a little bit of work, but there's still some more. This was like a little prep. You know, 2020 was a little prep, and 2021 is going to be more stronger in a way, to really go into it. I think 2020 was to build capacity for us to, you know, go into it more deeper. And I know that, I mean, I always say we're all trauma survivors. You know, let's be honest. Life is pain, and life is, you know, denying that there is pain in life will be foolish, will be, you know, fooling ourselves. Um, I'm not just talking about, I'm not tracking back to the childhood trauma, I'm tracking back way beyond childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, the birth itself, the primal trauma, you know, there's so much to take into consideration when it comes to doing inner work. It's not just about what happened to us in our childhood, but could be beyond that. So I think it's time for us to be connected to something bigger than what we think it is, and also practice humility, because there is a very limited, it's very limited what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And also practice humility that we bought into the intellect too much in the West in the last 100 years. I think we've bought into the intellect so much that we've, you know, it kind of drove us away from the essence of what we really are. we are intuitive creatures. We have a gut feeling. We have this capacity or ability to check in with ourselves in decision making, in anything. And we've literally given this away or given it to other people to make decisions for us. Authority figures, other figures in our lives, or people that we admire, we put them on pedestals. If you look at all of course I love the intellect, but I think we need to know where the line is. We need to draw the line, because with this AI technology and everything, like where we're going, it's driving us more and more away from connecting to our intuition and our heart and our spiritual being that we are. I think it's really time to practice humility and know that there is a higher order that we cannot comprehend with our physical limited brain, and we need to really start staying more humble and let go of these uncertainties of some there are some days where I'm incapable of planning tomorrow or the next few weeks, or almost incapable now. So I think we need to start really exploring and practicing letting go of the certainty and somehow allow trust, because these are my keywords for this year, 2021. Well, 2020 was all about trusting the process. I think even more so this year. I think eventually we will come to know to trust ourselves and trust the process and allow the unfolding of how things are. Because as much as we'd like to think we are in control, we're not in control of anything. That's just the way, our ego mechanism likes to keep us, surviving and thriving and connected to the physical realm. That's all fine, it's great. But I think being more mindful of it is going to help us go further forward, I think, this year.
Yeah, and I love what you just shared, because I feel like that kind of sums up a lot of the big problems we're going through, is that there's nothing wrong. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with your intellect, with the brain, or with the mind. It's really powerful, but it can become very destructive or inhumane when it's really disconnected from that heart and from that intuition.
Yeah.
And that now is a time that we really become aware of that, and that it's about really building and creating that connection to our feelings, to our emotions, and because a lot of times our mind wants to control, right? And it wants to believe that we are completely in control. And it can even organize an entire life upon that belief. So it seems real. And then 2020 happens, and it's like, whoosh, no, you don't have any control. And at first it can be really scary, but what I've noticed now is, in a way, when you allow and trust that, and trust that it's always been like that you're not in control. It's not just something that just happened last year. It's always been like that. And actually it turned into a relief for me. It's realizing you don't have to control everything. It's not all up to you.
Yeah.
Even how this pandemic is going to turn out, or even whatever it is, it's like, yes, we can focus on ourselves and on our inner circle and the impact we have on our communities, but it's about knowing that all those things that you're worried about, that are not in your control.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we watch media or consume something, we feel like we have a little bit more control, but actually that's not really real. It's not real control, but it's the knowing, the more we know, the more control we have. But the essence, I think, what we learn through going deep within ourselves, if it's either through meditation or psychedelic experiences, is that actually that there's so much more there that we don't know.
Yeah.
And that often that everything you knew can just through few experiences can be really washed away. And sometimes we need to allow that process to really happen. That, okay, it's okay to just allow that to wash away. And it does require us to have faith and to trust. And I think that's used to be something that, in a way, kind of religion kind of took over that place in a way. I think in the West and Christianity, you can say it's good or bad or evil or whatever, but it did kind of, we did came together in a place of trust and faith.
Yeah.
And I feel like now we can still do that, having different beliefs of all these things, but that we can still come together in trust and faith. And share our experience. If it's either positive or negative, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Trust is the new faith, new way of, approaching life.
Yeah, and we no longer have to know everything or hold on tight to all those rules or all this structure, but learning that our trust and our faith, actually, that's where all these spirituality and all these things actually come back to, in essence, and just by going within ourselves or connecting in a healthy way with others, we make that connection. We cultivate that trust deeper. Yeah, so Susan, I feel like we could go on for a very long time, of course, and there'll probably be more conversations coming up in the future. And for now, I would really, I'd love for you to share maybe a little bit about your meditation group for people who might be interested, because we talked a lot about connecting and finding spaces. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. So the meditation Facebook private group started in March. Actually, I had the desire to create a space for everyone to come together, free, no obligation. They don't need to interact. They can just come in and have a look. And because we do know everybody has different needs, and no pressure. You can just be there, just watch from far on the sidelines, or you want to interact, you can interact. So I started knowing that there's going to be many different types of people coming in around in January, and I was trying to figure out how can I create a space where it speaks to many different people from many different backgrounds, like beliefs and religion or upbringing or global, if anything. And before I had the time to figure out, March came and we were slammed with pandemic. The lockdown came so fast. We didn't know where, the beginning of last year, when the world was just shook, everything was just so calm down, crushing. And we went into a severe lockdown in the March. And I thought that week I was thinking, okay, stop procrastinating. This is a great time. So that's how it was birthed. And end of March, published it, and I announced a 21-day meditation cycle together. And that's how people came together. And we did a 21 days of meditation challenge with people all around the globe. It was amazing. Daily, contact and jumping on live Zooms for meditation and check-ins, daily check-ins and so on. It proved to be a thing. And then I realized it was such a perfect timing. It given people to move and step away from the horror and this new unknown pandemic that just hit the world, and people were in that highest levels of anxiety, what's happening, the unknown. And that kind of helped us come together, at least in a day, to just kind of step away from the horror of this, the reality, the current reality that dropped on us. And when this proven to be so success, I decided, okay, we need to go again. So gave a month break, back into again, second cycle. And then it became a thing, and then went into a third cycle. So now it will be a 21-day cycle every quarter. So And then what we do is in between, we just check in with each other, and we gather, weekly. So I think it's happening already. It's becoming a nice, safe space for everyone. And of course, everyone's welcome. All levels are welcome. It's got nothing to do with you have to be trained or at least pro at meditating. Is actually nothing like that. It's just literally open to everyone at all levels. So yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So it's just a meditation group on Facebook, and it's called the 21 Meditation Challenge.
21-day meditation challenge. Well, it was the cycle of the challenge, and the name just stayed, and I think it's fine.
It's a good name. Yeah, I still like it, right? Yeah, so I can also put the link in the description, so it's a little bit easier to find if someone is interested, and then they can join the next cycle. And then we also do conversations and post content and things in between too.
Yeah, all of that and more. We do actually, it's growing into a community, doing lots of activities now. There are conversations, there are, challenges just coming up. So yeah, it's going to be great.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, and I feel like that's a beautiful way to wrap it up. And yeah, I just really want to thank you for our conversation, and I really enjoyed reconnecting with you. And yeah, if you like
Always.
also more conversations in the future, then we are able to dive into other things.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. So yeah, all the best, everybody. Keep going.
Yeah, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.